Get your filthy paws off me, you damn dirty ape! Hello everybody, thank you for joining me today. I do truly appreciate it. I want to talk about a book that I just read. I read recently, a couple weeks ago I guess, called The Planet of the Apes by Pierre Boulle. And I'm not French, and I took a semester of French in high school, but maybe I say French names wrong, but I think that's how you pronounce it. I've, for years, been a huge fan of the 1968 Charleton Heston film called Planet of the Apes. Ever hear of it? And they've made other films, and they're all so different, and this and that. But to me, there's one Planet of the Apes movie, and it's 1968 Charleton Heston. And I've been wanting to read the book for quite some time, and I've always found reasons to put it off, other books to read. So this one just kept getting put off, put back, delayed. But I finally got around to it, and I want to show you really quickly, the Folio Society edition. I'm going to show you this because it's the only good edition of the book I actually have. I have this soft cover with the movie tie-in cover for the Marky Mark film, and this is actually the one I read, this one here. But this one I want to show you because it's the only nice version, unfortunately, that I have of this great book. And I say great book, spoiler alert, I thought it was flippin' fabulous. I give this book a 5 out of 5. Just me, I did dig it. But anyway, this edition from the Folio Society comes with a slipcase, which I like. Excellent artwork, and I'm glad to have it in my collection. Just a few seconds here, I want to show you some of the interior illustrations, because the Folio Society does great work. Sometimes, a lot of times, they do great work with illustrations. Cover your eyes, darling. Oh no, don't look. They do some great illustrations, and there's some great artwork in here. And the artwork in here is from David de las Heras. Give credit where credit is due. Heras, I don't know, Heras. But just to show you some of the interior illustrations in this book. And I'm a book lover, but also a book collector. And I like to have nice editions of my favorite books. I truly wish somebody would do a beautiful limited edition version of this book. But for now, the Folio Society edition is the nicest one that I have. Maybe there are others nicer out there. If there are, I'm not familiar with them, and I definitely haven't added them to my collection yet. Just I'll show you another picture here real quick while I got the book out anyway. Some great illustrations in here, and the book looks so good. But I finally got around to reading The Planet of the Apes by Pierre Boulle. It was originally written in 1963, and it was written in French. So I'm reading an English translation, naturally. And that brings some of the big differences between the book, not only facts and events, but characters. The characters in the 1968 film with the iconic American actor Charleton Heston have American names. So in the movie, George Taylor. In the book, Ulysses Morrell. Some other things, like they speak French. Of course, I'm reading it in English, but they speak French. They talk about some French people, scientists, geniuses, and things like that. But the main thing is that the characters are different. Now, it was translated, and at times it felt like some of the words were used differently than I would expect them to be used. But for the most part, the translation was pretty seamless. There, like I said, time or two, something felt kind of clunky in there. But I liked it. And I'm going to tell you, I love this book. Strangely enough, when I read this book, I felt like, I would say, shades of H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. Maybe it's because of the first-person narrator type of a storytelling. The adventures are kind of similar. A person going to a different place, having to figure out what's going on, telling his story as he goes, sort of a thing. So I love The Time Machine, one of my favorite books. And this one is also now one of my favorite books. But the story is different from the 1968 movie in many ways, including the ending, which at some point I'll tell you, spoiler alert, and I'll tell the differences. This book is very old. The movie is very old. If you haven't read them, Well, I didn't read it until recently, so what am I talking about? Anyway, this book, it starts off in a very different way. You have a couple of characters, Jen and Phyllis, and they're traveling around. They're like now we have people on cruise ships. They cruise for fun. Well, they would wander the universe on a skiff by sail for leisure. They just liked it. So they're doing this way they're passing the time, enjoying their lives, and they find this thing floating in space. Turns out to be a bottle with a manuscript in it. So they're able to find a way to get this skiff just right so they could get that bottle and read the manuscript, and that is our story all the way to the very end. And so the Planet of the Apes story is them reading the manuscript, and the manuscript is written by Ulysses Morrell, who was played by Charleton Heston as George Taylor in the movie. So he's the main character in this story. Ulysses and a couple of other people. We have Professor Antel and another one called Levian. Professor Levian's a young guy. Professor Antel is the genius, highly respected and all that stuff. And Ulysses, Antel, and Levian, they decide to travel a 2-year trip going 300 light years away. And it kind of explains how it all works. But they take this trip that takes 2 years for them. Meanwhile, 350 years will pass on Earth while they're making this trip there. So in theory, to go there and back, 700 years would pass on Earth. But they're traveling to this sun called Betelgeuse, and they wind up on a planet that they would later find out is called Soror. 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 But anyway, they're on this ship, and they're going to this Betelgeuse solar system, to this planet they would later find out is called Soror. And they leave their big craft in orbit around the planet. And they take the smaller thing to Soror to land on there. Meanwhile, their main ship is still in orbit, going around this planet. They get there, and much like the movie, they're kind of exploring a little bit, looking around, and they find people. Whoa, people. But these people are different. They don't talk. They don't wear clothes, which probably is problematic for the movie. So the movie changed some of that stuff. They don't wear clothes. They're like animals. They don't show any sort of understanding or intelligence in their face or eyes. They act just like an animal. And there's one girl who would later become called Nova by Ulysses that seems to take a special interest in him. But when the rest of the folks see these three people from Earth with clothes on, the humans on Soror go nuts. They rip the clothes off. They can't stand it. They don't know why. It doesn't make sense. They tear the clothes off, and you find out pretty soon why. This planet is inhabited by intelligent apes. The apes come. They hunt down the humans. They kill some of them. They capture some of them, and they use some of them. The intent is to use some of them for scientific experiments, so they can learn more about their own bodies by studying human bodies, kind of like we do testing now on animals to learn more about what would work for us and stuff. So it's a similar situation to that. And the people are separated. The people from Earth are separated. Ulysses, who will later on run into Professor Antel. But Ulysses put in a cage, and he's being studied. There's other humans that were native to Soror there. And he ends up being in the same cage at some point with Nova. He develops a fondness for her and such as that. But just like in the book, Zaya is a chimpanzee, and she realizes that he's different from all the others. Not only can he talk, and she realizes that he's not, she doesn't understand what he's saying. In the movie, they speak the same language. In the book, they don't. He's speaking in French. She's speaking in their simian native language. But she realizes that he's doing more than just making sounds. He's speaking in some language she doesn't understand. She sees the brightness in his eyes and the intelligence and things. And to go back just a hair, much like the movie, the simians are broken up into 3 basic species, or races, perhaps. You have the gorillas. The gorillas are more like the warriors, the soldiers, the police, the government. They're leaders. They're strong, and they lead. The orangutans are more like the historians, the religious leaders, and they kind of rule over science using history and using what they think is history, what they consider history, as well as religion. The chimpanzees are the true scientists, but they're subjects to the gorillas and the orangutans. And if things that the chimpanzees come up with don't jive with their proven history that the orangutans have, well, then the chimpanzees are accused of heresy. And we deal with some of that stuff in this book. So Zaya, and she's engaged to Cornelius, who's a biologist and an archaeologist, and he's doing some big studies. They end up determining that Ulysses is not a human from there. Zaya and Ulysses spend a lot of time learning each other's language so they can communicate very well in Simian and in French. And he explains to her all about their trip, where he came from and stuff. She believes him. It's the only thing that makes sense. In the process, of course, the lead orangutan, Professor Zaius, or whatever, the Zaius anyway, he says it's all BS. It doesn't make any sense. And he finds a way to try to prove it. They realize that Ulysses and Nova have a special bond. So he puts Ulysses and Nova finally back together in this cage. And Ulysses, feeling kind of hopeless, decides, okay, he's just going to be like the rest of the humans, because he wants to be able to keep Nova and not let her go to some other local humans for breeding and stuff, because they act like wild animals. He wants to protect her from that. So in sort of despair, he decides to just try to act like a normal local human. He ends up taking her as a mate, husband and wife, he and she sort of stuff. And somewhere in that process, he decides, I'm better than this. I'm an intelligent person. I need to act that way. And he's able to convince them all of the apes, that what he's saying is true. He proves himself. They end up letting him out, letting him wear clothes, because all of the humans are nude, which was a problem for the movie. Why it didn't happen in the movie. It's hard to have your main character spend half the film naked, walking around. But anyway, they end up convincing everybody. This guy comes from a different planet. He's not like the humans on this planet. And he gets to go live out in society, act as a scientist, go on archaeological, easy for me to say, expeditions, and things along those lines. This planet is not like the Planet of the Apes movie in 1968, where they're riding around on horses and things. These apes on this planet, Soros, they're more like 1960s Earth. They're driving in cars. They have roads. They live in apartment buildings in cities. Things work a little bit differently. They have traffic lights and stuff, but instead of walking on sidewalks, they swing across overhead structures by hand, because they're good at stuff like that, unlike humans. Now's where I'm going to say, spoiler alert. How about that? Maybe I should have said that earlier. We'll think about it. Anyway. And all seems to be going rather well for Ulysses, but on the archaeological expedition that they were on, it was kind of like the movie. They ended up finding a porcelain doll, human baby doll, that spoke, said mama and papa. And it turns out papa in French is the same thing as papa in the Simian language, just like it would be in English as well. And one thing happens while he's off on an archaeological expedition for a while. He comes back to find that Nova is pregnant, which seems cool, except the orangutans and the gorillas are not going to have anything to do with that. He's going to be breeding with humans. What happens if their offspring are intelligent like him? Well, that means that his offspring might end up changing their world as they know it, and they're not going to put up with that at all. So the chimpanzees predict this. He understands this, and they decide they've got to get Ulysses, Nova, and now their baby off the planet, because the baby is showing true signs of intelligence. And that also scares them. So they've got to get rid of Ulysses, eliminate it all. Now, there's one thing that pops up in this book that in the movie was explained explicitly. In the book, it was not. The apes end up showing Ulysses that they've learned how to do surgery on human brains and change their way they behave. And they show that they had found an intelligent human. They took out part of his brain, and he acted just like all the rest of the humans after that. Now, Professor Antel becomes Ulysses' project, because he says Antel came from the same planet as me, just as intelligent as I am, but they find he shows zero intelligence at all. He's acting just like the humans, no light in his eyes, no response. They give Ulysses for a while a chance to try to get it out of him, to get him to snap out of it, and it never works. The book doesn't explain why it doesn't work, but they do talk about how they can do surgery on people's brains and take away their intelligence. They don't say they did that on Professor Antel, and there's no mention or even evidence, no mention of scars or anything like that might have shown that they had lobotomized him. But the movie goes right there. So I kind of wonder, was this a gap in translation? Was this the intent in the story? Or did they just never explain why Professor Antel lost his intelligence and became just like a local human with no sentience, just like an animal? Anyway, they end up taking an ape-made rocket, which their space travel was very rudimentary. But they took this rocket, which was intended to take 3 normal humans and send them off into space for something. A man, a woman, and an infant. And they substituted Ulysses, Nova, and their child, put them on this ship, flew it up in there, and Ulysses was able to hit his spacecraft, which was floating in orbit, take that mother, turn it around 180 degrees, and head back to Earth. 350 Earth years later, they arrive on Earth. And when they get there, they are so happy. Now, I told you already, spoiler alert, maybe I said it too late, but I don't want to, I want you to know this is spoilers. In the 1968 movie, he never leaves the planet. He goes around along the beach, looks up, sees the Statue of Liberty broken, standing up over the beach, and he realizes he just flew around and landed back on Earth way in the future, and that humans had ruined it. Apes evolved and took over. On this planet Soros, they realized scientifically that humans had at one point been the intelligent creature, but they lost it. Apes developed and they took over there. But now he's flying back to Earth on a rocket ship. They land on Earth, the 3 of them. The young one is now older, a couple years old, 2 or 3 years old. They land on Earth, or land in an airport sort of a thing, and a vehicle comes up and they're all excited. Hey, somebody's come to greet us. We got a lot of stories to tell here. But as that car opens up and the shadowy figure gets closer and closer, he realizes that this is an ape. So a lot like the Marky Mark movie, he got back to Earth 700 years later or something like that, only to find out that there on Earth, humans had lost it. They digressed, degenerated. Apes developed and became the supreme being on the planet, the intelligent being on the planet. On Earth, the same thing had happened. And then we finished the story with a little brief snippet, our original cast of Jen and Phyllis touring around the solar system. They read this and they say, as apes, what a story. How could this possibly happen that a human would be able to do all this kind of stuff? And you find out that Jen and Phyllis also are apes. So the book has twists, much different than the movie twists, more similar in way to the Marky Mark movie twist, although different, done differently. But that was a neat thing. I liked this book a lot all the way through, and I liked the twist at the end. So the Charleton Heston 1968 movie is often considered great, with a great twist at the end that you don't want to have spoiled until you see it for the first time. The book also has a much different twist, and then another twist. So beautiful, beautiful book. Way to stick the finish. Pierre Boulle also did Bridge on the River Kwai, which spawned another amazing movie called The Bridge Over the River Kwai. That's up on my reading list to come. I can't wait to read that one as well. I love that movie. I'm hoping I love that book as much as I loved this book. But Planet of the Apes by Pierre Boulle, 5 stars, 5 out of 5. I did love this book. I hope somebody makes a beautiful limited edition version of it. And I can think of no more lies to tell. So thank you for your time. I do truly appreciate it. And say la vie, baby. Doo-doo.